in from the States, but if you are, I'm curious what the weather, I think it's cold by you, but it's gotten cold and rainy here as well. We're starting off the semester, we're starting off the semester with a well-known figure who we've only peripherally studied. It's the figure of Rabbi Meir. And let me just write, okay. And while we have looked at Rabbi Meir with regard to his relationship to Rabbi Akiva, his relationship to Brurya, we have not really dived into Rabbi Meir on his own merit. And so we're going to start with Rabbi Meir. We're actually then going to look at his teacher, Elisha ben Abuya. And we in the 2 years I've been teaching, people have said, when are we getting to Elisha ben Abuya? We're going to get to Elisha ben Abuya in the next few weeks after we finish with Rabbi Meir. And then we're going to begin looking at really the last generation of the Tanaim, culminating with Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rabbi Judah the Prince. And after that, we'll move into the Amoraim. So this, I intend to be my last year teaching this series of the sages, using Benny Lau's books as our timeline. The order that he brings the sages in is largely the order I've been following. And we'll see next year something else, something new. Rabbi Meir is one of he's one of the two leading students of Rabbi Akiva. He and Shimon Bar Yochai really stand out as Rabbi Akiva's lead students. He's one of the five, as we'll see, who was ordained after the 24,000 students were reputed to have died. But he's also a student of Rabbi Yishmael. He's also a student of Elisha ben Abuya. And Benny Lau says and describes him as Acher. Elisha ben Abuya is really Acher. But there's something Acherim Omrim, others say, and that's often attributed to Rabbi Meir. The halacha does not follow Rabbi Meir, but he becomes a significant contributor to the Beit Midrash of the Tanaim, as we will see. So I'm going to share my screen, and we are going to start our learning. Very excited to be teaching you and to be looking at some new material, which for myself is always very, very interesting. So I called this Rebbe Meir all about the light of Torah. And the reason I did that is because there are a lot of sources having to do with light that surround Rabbi Meir. And the one that really stands out tremendously is this beautiful Midrash in Breshit Rabbah. And since we just started Sefer Breshit, it's particularly relevant for this time of year. Vayas Adonai Elohim la'adam u'leishto katonet or v'yalbishem. So pay attention to the way the text is written here, kutnot or with an ayin. And or with an ayin means garments of skin, of animal hide, v'yalbishem, and he clothed them. B'torato shel Rabbi Meir matzu katuv kotnot or with an aleph. Rabbi
Nechama, I don't hear you.
There's a change from ayin to aleph, that God clothed them in garments of light. And there's something very profound about that letter shift. Garments of or, we're going to see in a moment how the rabbis try to wrestle with what these first garments look like. But garments of light is already something ephemeral. It's something a little abstract. There's nothing concrete. How can you clothe someone in garments of light? But for Rabbi Meir, the Torah is or. And when God clothes them, it's clear to Rabbi Meir, the tradition he has, if God clothes them in the light, the first light that God creates, which really is reflective of the light of Torah. Because I like Midrash and because the rest of the Midrash now goes back to what are these clothing, I wanted to share some of the other positions and circle back to Rabbi Meir. Elu bigdei adam harishon shehem domim lepigam, rechavim milamata v'tzarim milamala. I had a very hard time understanding this word pigam. It's translated as rue R-U-E. But rue in modern English means to rue, to regret. Could not figure out how to make that work. It turns out in Old English, rue is a kind of garden herb, and apparently it's narrow at bottom and wide at the top. And so they said somehow the clothing of Adam the first were narrow and then widened, I guess like an inverted triangle. And it is true that our shoulders are broader than our legs. And so that's their point of reference. Maybe something to do with the garden. I don't know. Interesting. Rabbi Yitzchak Ravi Omer, Chalakim hayu kitziporen v'naim kamar galuyot. So Rabbi Yitzchak of Ravia said they were as smooth as a fingernail and as pretty as jewels. And by the way, lest we think this is completely irrelevant, the idea that it's like a tziporen is one of the reasons we look at our nails at Havdalah. The whole Havdalah ceremony is a throwback to Midrashim. At the end of the first Shabbat, the idea that Adam is thrust into darkness when Shabbat ends, and then God shows him how to create fire. So there's light in his darkness. And the second, the ritual of looking at the fingernails is attributed to this midrash that the first clothing we were clothed in resembled fingernails in terms of their smoothness. So they were similar, like they were smooth as fingernails and as pretty as jewels. Then we have Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Kichli Pishtan. They weren't animal hides. They were more like linen garments, Hadakim, Habayim, Beit Shan. So everyone's trying to figure out if God is going to clothe you, how intricate, ornate, beautiful, comfortable are those clothing? So in human language, we're going to call them kutnot or garments made of skin. But Rabbi Meir, who's the second opinion brought, says no, but it's God who's clothing them. There has to be something godlike in the garment. And so Rabbi Yitzchak, when he says, Rabbi Yitzchak says, like fingernails and jewels, that's very, very fine clothing. Where are they getting these fine clothing in the Garden of Eden? They're not like crude animal hide. And kichli pishtan, then we have this idea of thin linen garments from Beit Shan, which makes me wonder if he was perhaps not in the industry. Then we have kutnot or shein dvukin la'or. They were samud, they were attached to the skin the way animals wear their hide. That's how close they were, like a second skin, literally. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, agnaya, which are like goat hides. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi Omer is lagai, garments that cover the skin. Everyone's trying to figure out. Now we've moved into animal garments. Rabbi Yassi then says hair hides. They're trying to, what kind of animals would there be in Eden that God borrowed from? Rabbi Yassi Bar Chanina says hides with wool. I'm over here. Reish Lakish says radiant hides, and the firstborn sons would use them. And Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachman says they were camel wool and hair wool and so on, because they were garments that come from hide. So we see really, it's not disagreement really. It's an attempt to understand what kind of clothing would God clothe the first humans in? And do we go to something very concrete? And if it's animal, what kind of animal? And then we're debating what animal would God have chosen? The goat, which is a kosher animal, the hare, which is not a kosher animal, and so the camel, what's the softest wool? What's the most comfortable skin? And then we have the Rabbi Yitzchak Ravia with the smoothest fingernail and pretty as jewels, the thin linen garments. Of course, they couldn't be linen garments there in Eden. And it says or with an ayin. But Rabbi Meir now becomes clearer in trying to invest these garments with something beyond human capability. That if it's God, there must be something unique. And or with an aleph is one of the first things God creates, Vayihi or, and he says that's what God used. The first thing that God created is what God then clothed them in. The first item of creation. Okay, so that was just a little bit of an introduction to Rabbi Meir within the world of the academy. He stands out. what he's saying is not from this world. It's very otherworldly. But Rabbi Meir is going to the Or, Vayihi Or, and he's doing a wordplay, Ayin Aleph, and he changes it in his Torah scroll. That becomes the way he reads and interprets the word Or, Kutnot Or. We're now going to take a look at who is Rabbi Meir. Who is Rabbi Meir? And some of these sources will be familiar, and some of them will definitely not. Amru, Shnei Masar Elef Zugot Talmidim Hayulo the Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva had 12,000 pairs of disciples. We know this source. Migavat ad Antipat Paris, v'kulam metu beperak echad minei shelo nahagu kavod ze lezeh. They all died at the same time because they did not treat each other with respect. V'haya ha'olam shamim, and the world was desolate. The world of Torah was desolate. Ad sheba Rabbi Akiva etzel rabotenu shebadarom v'shin alahem Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yassi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, v'hem ha'emidu Torah ota sha'a. So Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Akiva goes and ordains 5 students. One of them is Rabbi Meir after the world has become desolate with Torah. And now we're going to take a look at a source in Sanhedrin. The Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Stam Mishnah Rabbi Meir, Stam Tosefta Rabbi Nechemia, Stam Sifra Rabbi Yehuda, Stam Sifrei Rabbi Shimon, V'kulu Aliba Rabbi Akiva. That all of these students of his become the unattributed, hold on. Oh, someone's writing to me that they can't get into the classroom. Hold on one second. I'm just trying to see who it is. I apologize. I can't see. I don't know who it is. I'm sorry. Someone just wrote to me they can't get into the Zoom date. Says Shauna Tepperman. Is there someone here from Matan on the monitoring?
I am.
Okay, so let me give you the number of this person. 054-807-6588. Please be in touch with her because I can't do anything right now. Sorry.
Yes, of course.
Yes. The beauty of starting a new class. So what we have here is the stam position in the Mishnah, and there often is an unattributed position. That's Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir's Torah is so good. We're not going to paskin like him. We're going to see. Halacha is not like Rabbi Meir. No matter. His Torah is so significant that all unattributed positions in the Mishnah are going to be Rabbi Meir, unless they're the Chachamim, right? The Chachamim as a mass. Then we have Rabbi Nechemia is in the Tosefta. Is Rabbi Nechemia, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon. All of these are Rabbi Akiva's students, and they all make their way into the Tanaitic corpus of rabbinic text. Will be led by the school of Rabbi Akiva, even though that's not the only school. And we know that Rabbi Yishmael has import and Rabbi Yoshua, and we've learned about them in the past. I will just say that next week, I hope to bring a very interesting conflict between the Torah Rabbi Meir learns with Rabbi Akiva and the Torah he learns with Rabbi Yishmael. He is not loyal to only one school. He goes wherever the Torah takes him. And so as a result, he's a little more complex in terms of how he understands halacha. Okay. This is from the Yerushalmi. Rabbi Akiva at Rabbi Meir at Rabbi Shimon. In earlier times, Rabbi Abba says, everyone was ordaining his students. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai ordained Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yoshua ordained Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva, and that's what I read in Hebrew, ordains Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Yashav Rabbi Meir Tchila. But what did he say? Rabbi Meir goes first. Rabbi Meir presides. Nitkarkamu Pnei Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon becomes yellow with envy. Really, you're green with envy. So I'm not sure. Right? Is it envy? Is it grief? Is it anger? But his face turns a peculiar color. Maybe like right before you throw up. I don't know. You turn yellow. Amarlo Rabbi Akiva. Dayecha shani uvarecha makirin kochacha. It's enough that I and your creator recognize your power. I'm going to pause here. I'm going to actually even stop sharing. I want you to remember Dayecha shani uvarecha makirin kochacha. Because if you remember the Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai coming out of this cave story, stories borrow from one another and they borrow phrases. I can't say who borrowed from who. Rabbi Akiva prefers Rabbi Meir. He puts Rabbi Meir first, and he sends Rabbi Meir out to lead. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai becomes agitated and upset, understandably. You never want to be the second. Right? You want to be the first. But if you remember when Shimon Bar Yochai comes out of the cave the first time, he and his son destroy everything they see. They go back into the cave. And when they come out the second time, his son continues to destroy. And he says, Dayecha haolam ani va'ata. It's enough. It's enough for the world, you and I. And I said there are different ways to understand that. And one of the ways I understood it is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's Torah is too intense. It's too harsh. It's enough. The world can't handle more than Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon. And here too, I feel like there's an echo of that, where Rabbi Akiva says, Dayecha, it's enough. Your creator knows how great your Torah is. Your creator knows how true you are and how you excel in your Avodat Hashem and Yirat Hashem and so on. V'dayecha, right? And that has to be enough. And Rabbi Meir's Torah, even though it's not going to be the halacha l'maaseh, has a farther reach, has more complexity, and to some degree has more compassion, although not completely. We're going to see that Rabbi Meir also, like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, can be very, very extreme when it comes to protecting the world of Torah. But I'm just sharing with you, the word dayecha doesn't appear in a lot of stories. It appears here where Rabbi Shimon feels rejected and Rabbi Akiva comforts him. And it appears in the cave story where he turns and brings comfort to his son. So there's something about dayecha, dayenu maybe, that's meant to bring us comfort. If we know who we are and how we're living our lives, maybe being more than that is too much, right? Sometimes dayecha has to be the word that leads us. Anyone have a comment? It's a Zoom thing and it's more of a lecture, I know. But if someone has something they want to drop in the chat, I will check. I will check occasionally to see if there's a question. That I'm going to leave the chat open. Okay, so I'm now going to go back to my sources, and we're going to see a little bit more. We're learning about Rabbi Meir. So far, we've seen he's drawn to the Torah, the light of Torah. He feels light is the leading quality that God has bequeathed on the world, both through the creation of light, the Torah, and the clothing he clothed Adam in. We haven't yet played with the idea his name Meir has within it something embedded in his name is Ur. We'll come to that. Just a little bit more about Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Meir. This is from Avot Rabbi Natan. Rabbi Akiva says, if you have taught Torah in your youth, teach Torah in your old age. Do not say, I shall not teach Torah in my old age, since you do not know which is going to succeed, or if both will succeed in your hand, or both are equally good. And that's the debate, Boker zera et zarecha, uve'erev al tanech yadecha. In the morning, sow your seed, and in the evening, do not rest your hand. This debate is really an ongoing debate between many, many Tannaitic sages. What does it mean to sow your seeds in the morning and do not rest in the evening? It can literally be a call to the farmer or to the business person. It could be to the Torah teacher, Torah scholar. It could be to the parents, keep having children, all sorts of ways to understand the idea that you sow in the morning and you continue to sow or not rest in the evening. Lots of things we could do with that. Rabbi Akiva turns it inward to himself, and he basically gives himself license to keep teaching Torah for as long as he lives. And this idea that maybe as I get older, I should make way for it's time for me to retire, to step down. He says, no, you don't know what of your Torah will succeed. And there's a richness and a depth that can come as we can continue to teach and see how it impacts the world in which we live. Rabbi Meir says, here's the difference. If you have studied with one Torah, do not say die. There's that word die again. Do not say dayenu, it's enough. On the contrary, go to another teacher and study Torah. And so he takes that, it's also inward facing. It's about his own life. He goes and studies with Rabbi Yishmael. He goes and studies with Elisha ben Abuya. And really, some of the most fascinating stories are the stories of Rabbi Meir with his wife Bruria, Rabbi Meir with his teacher Elisha ben Abuya, and we're going to see other interactions he has with people from outside the academy, and he is willing to engage and talk and learn and discourse from those outside, the acher, the woman, right, his wife, and Elisha ben Abuya, who is thrown out. We saw the next source, but I think I actually skipped this part. It's the end of the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, and it's where Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai goes to Vespasian and asks for Yavna. So I taught it way back in the first year, where we were really focused on the end of Bayit Sheni and the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, and there was an excerpt about Nero, who is sent initially before Vespasian is sent. It's the Talmud. The Roman authorities then sent Nero Caesar against the Jews. When he came to Jerusalem, he wished to test his faith. He shot an arrow to the east, and the arrow fell in Jerusalem. He shot an arrow to the west, and the arrow fell in Jerusalem. He shot an arrow in all four directions, and the arrow fell in Jerusalem. Seems to suggest that maybe he has license to go and destroy Jerusalem. He said to a child, tell me a verse that you learned today. He stops a child on the street. Not the first time. We're going to see it with Elisha ben Abuya over and over, where you stop a child and ask what he's learned in the base medrash today, in the little school. And the child tells him a pasuk that he then extrapolates to his own life. And what does the child say? And I will lay my vengeance upon Edom by the hand of my people Israel. Nero said, the Holy One, blessed be he, wishes to destroy his temple, and he wishes to wipe his hands with that man, meaning with me. If I continue, I'll eventually be punished. In other words, he recognizes God is moving towards the destruction of the temple. That's why the arrows keep falling in Jerusalem. But this pasuk in Yechezkel tells Nero that after it all settles, God's coming after Edom. And Nero says, I understand Edom is Rome, and I am not interested. So he fled and became a convert. And ultimately, Rabbi Meir descended from him. Now, I want to say, I don't believe that. I cannot prove that this source has any historical significance. It's certainly an interesting source. It's a beautiful source, a source of an enemy who chooses a different way, who recognizes that there is a path towards destruction and wants to have nothing to do with it because he realizes the day after that, this is not going to be good for those who destroyed God's temple and God's people. And so he converts, and ultimately Rabbi Meir, which tells me something about Rabbi Meir, the complexity of Rabbi Meir, that he's not standard. Now, I'll pause and say Rabbi Akiva wasn't very standard either. He discovers the Torah at the age of 40. Many of our sages have interesting and complex backstories of poverty, of ignorance. And here we have perhaps the most extreme, which is Meir descending from Nero, who was meant to destroy the temple. So very interesting. Amar Rabbi Acha bar Chanina. So now I'm going to go, the last few sources had a lot of Aramaic, but when it's Hebrew, I like to do a little Hebrew. Galoi v'yadua lifnei misha amar v'haya ha'olam she'ein b'toro Rabbi Meir kamoto. So we're still trying to get a sense of who is Rabbi Meir. We first met him through a midrash on light. We then started looking at his relationship to the world of Torah, who his main teacher was, at least until now, Rabbi Akiva. We then saw a peculiar source that wants to figure out who Rabbi Meir is descended from. We have almost no information about Rabbi Meir's family. And Rabbi Meir is linked to Nero in a bizarre coupling. And now we're coming to the greatness, the intellectual greatness of Rabbi Meir. And Rabbi Acha says, it is revealed and known before, basically HaKadosh Baruch Hu, before the one who spoke and the world came into being, that in the generation of Rabbi Meir, there was no one who was his equal, which is going to beg the question, why he doesn't become the halachic leading authority. We're going to see in a moment. And the Gemara asks that. Why wasn't the halacha determined like him? Shelo yachlu chaverav l'amod al sof da'ato. They couldn't fully follow him. It's like if I invite an astrophysicist to dinner and he begins telling me all the theories of physics, I am really not going to understand what he's talking about. And he was so brilliant that they could not follow him completely. Shehu omer al tamei tahor umarelo panim al tahor tamei umarelo panim. He was actually able to equally prove that something tamei was tahor and something tahor was tamei. Like his ability to justify rulings from two opposite positions. They couldn't understand, well, what's halacha and what's not? What are you trying to do here? So they recognized that they could not haskin according to his methodology because there was something a little too esoteric and brilliant about it. It had to be brought down more to the people. Same Gemara, we're now in Eruvin, Tana. Lo Rabbi Meir Shmo, Ela Rabbi Nehorai Shmo. Rabbi Meir is not really his name, says the Braita. His name was Nehorai, which has within it Nahor, Sagi Nahor, light. Nahor is light in Aramaic. V'lama nikra Shmo Rabbi Meir. Shehu Meir Einei Chachamim B'Halacha. Now, the same source that told me his methodology was too brilliant, it was a little too esoteric, tells me that they loved it in the academy. He would illuminate the halacha for them. Interesting. V'lo Nehorai Shmo Ela Rabbi Nechemia Shmo. They said, well, you know what? His name wasn't really Nehorai, it was Nechemia. V'amri la Rabbi Elazar ben Arach Shmo. This to me is really interesting for those who were with me, I think the first year. They say, no, his name is really Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. We'll talk about that character in a moment. V'lama nikra Shmo Nehorai shemanhir einei chachamim b'halacha. They changed his name from Nechemia or from Elazar to a name that more reflected the light of Torah that he illuminated, that he would illuminate the eyes of the sages in halacha. That's how brilliant he was. Now, Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, for those who remember, he appears in Pirkei Avot, and he's one of the students of Yochanan ben Zakkai. And Yochanan ben Zakkai, again, for those who remember, this will be a little chazara, a little review. Yochanan ben Zakkai asks his student to say what is the best quality that a person should seek, a good neighbor, a good heart, and so on. What is the worst quality? A bad neighbor, a bad heart, and so on. And in one of his statements, he says, if I could take all of the sages on one scale and Rabbi Elazar ben Arach on the other, he would weigh more, he would have more weight. So Rabbi Elazar ben Arach is also known as a brilliant scholar, a thinker, a wonderful character. But Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, for those who remember him, is not a team player. And he ends up becoming a mystic and essentially abandoning the world of academy, and he completely disappears. He is compared to, just give me a moment, he withdraws from his colleagues. He's compared to a spring that does not end, that does not dry up. But ultimately, he's I'm going to use a very modern word, but in the way I want to use it, he's an isolationist, meaning he is unable to really be part of the world of Beit Midrash with his fellow colleagues, and his Torah was lost. And maybe Benny Lau suggests that by saying he's really Elazar ben Arach, they're suggesting he has a similar personality. His trait is somewhat in isolation. He learns, right? He goes from Rabbi Akiva to Rabbi Yishmael and Elisha ben Abuya, but as a result, he doesn't have the companionship that is really necessary to be a leading authority in Torah. I will say, despite all this, he's going to become the head of a yeshiva and he's going to become a judge. He's not going to become lost. He's not Elazar ben Arach. He's not Elisha ben Abuya, but it's a little hard to pin down who he is and where exactly he's coming from. He's a little bit of other, right? A little bit of something other. We're now going to read a story, same piece of Talmud. We have the story about his brilliance is such that they can't really follow his way of thinking. We then learned about his name. The word Meir is very much reflective of light. It implies the light that he brings to Torah and Halacha, not implies, states, illuminates his core quality of illuminating Halacha and Torah. Certainly connects us back to the way he reads Torah and the Kutnot Bur. And now, this last piece from the same piece of Gemara. The Gemara relates that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said, the fact, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, I said that we're moving towards Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi in this course. We're going to get to Rebbe, who is the redactor of the Mishnah. And so he says, the reason I'm more incisive is that I saw Rabbi Meir from behind. Now, anyone want to, I'll give you a moment, you can guess. Anyone want to put in the chat what that suggests? He sees him from behind, a man who is hulo ur, who reflects light, who connects to the divine light of creation. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says, I sat behind him from the back. Had I seen him from the front, I would be even more incisive. So I'm curious if anyone, I don't know if I can get to the chat without closing. Let's see, anyone can guess where the storyteller is, what might be alluded to here. Moshe, Hashem, right, Kiviyachol. But this idea that he reflects some sort of greatness, some sort of divine light. You can't even really see him from the front. You see him from behind. And by seeing him from behind, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is able to absorb so much more clarity from the light he emits, even though, ironically, Rabbi Meir is not as clear. They can't learn Torah from him because they don't, his clarity maybe is too sharp, the light is too bright. But by seeing him from behind, Rabbi Yehuda is able to gain more clarity in his own teaching, right? And he says, I don't even know what it would have looked like if I had seen him from the front. It would have been, he quotes now Yeshayahu, and your eyes shall see your teacher. It would have been even more, but he doesn't see him from the front. He only sees him from behind. Rabbi Abahu said that Rabbi Yochanan said that Rabbi Meir had a disciple and his name was Sumachus Sumkus, who would state with regard to each and every matter of ritual impurity 48 reasons in support of the impurity and 48 reasons in support of the purity. Sumchus continues this idea of being able to coherently argue positions for and against purity and impurity. He takes Rabbi Meir onward, but of course he also is not going to become a leading halachic authority because what he does is brilliant, but we don't always need brilliance. Sometimes we need something more concrete. Sometimes the garments really need to be made of hide. They need to be made of linen. They need to be made of something that we can conceptualize. When we become too brilliant and too abstract, sometimes it stays up there. What we can gain, says Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, is the ability to use some of that light and pull it into our Torah and create clarity closer to the ground. So that's a little bit more of Rabbi Meir. This last source I find also I love this source. It's from the Tosefta of Megillah, Mitzvat Megillah mitchilata va'ad sofa divrei Rabbi Meir. So there's a mitzvah to hear the Megillah from the beginning until end. That we actually know. Rabbi Yehuda Omer mi'ish Yehudi. This is a debate. If you walk in late, at what point do you have to go back to the beginning? And Rabbi Yehuda says from Ish Yehudi, the pasuk about Mordechai, Ish Yehudi haya b'Shushana bira, I can't believe I'm blanking on it, right? And Rabbi Yossi says, Me'achar hadvarim ha'ela. So each of them basically say that the Megillah is nice, but the mitzvah is um, when when Mordechai steps into the story, not the whole backstory about the feast. So Rabbi Meir says, "Mitchilata ad sofa." This actually is a place where I believe we rule like Rabbi Meir. Oh. And oh, that's really funny. The Hebrew and the English don't line up. It must have been the next Tosefta, but it is interesting. Rabbi Shimon says, okay, they all agree you have to hear from whatever point till the end. But what I like is Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said he went to Asya. He went to declare Ibur Hashana, right? He's gonna create a leap year. And he could not find a scroll of Esther written in Hebrew. So he wrote one from memory and then he went back and read from it. I love that. Right? He knows he knows Megillah Esther by heart. He just sits down and writes a Megillah. Who can do that? Right? So he lives in a world of genius and light, the light of his genius, and that serves him well. Okay, so I'm gonna now start a little bit. We're gonna see a few of these stories. This is more his interpretation to give us a little more of his Torah. Okay, this is in Brachot. Rabbi Meir would say as follows: Margala bapume de Rabbi Meir. Hergel, right? The word ragil, pume is mouth. It was customary for this to come out of Rabbi Meir's mouth. Gemor b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha ladat et drachai v'lishkod al datei torati nitzor torati b'libecha v'neged einecha tiyeh yirati shmor picha mikol chet v'taher v'kadesh atzmacha mikol ashama v'avon v'ani ayeh imcha b'chol makom. And what would he say? Study with all your heart and all your soul to know my ways and to be diligent at the doors of my Torah. Keep my Torah in your heart, and fear of me should be before your eyes. Guard your mouth from all transgressions and purify and sanctify yourself from all fault and iniquity. So this is a daf in the Gemara where different Tanaim and a lot of Amoraim have personal prayers that they say as they enter the Mikdash, Beit HaMidrash, or they wake up in the morning. This is Rabbi Meir's. It's a very beautiful prayer. You have in it b'chol lebavcha v'chol nafshecha, echoes of the Shema. This idea also of shmor picha mikol chet, and so on. And this idea of, and if you do so, I will be with you everywhere. It's a prayer for himself, but also asking God to reciprocate. So this is the next source we're going to look at, and this is an interesting wordplay, and we'll see it in a moment. Commanded the one in charge of his house, saying, "Fill them." It also has light in it. "Fill the men's sacks with food, as much as they are able to carry, and place each man's silver at the opening of his sack. And place my goblet, the silver goblet, at the opening of the sack of the youngest, and the silver of his purchase of the grain." He did so in accordance with the statement that Joseph had spoken. Morning broke, haboker ur, and the men were dispatched, they and their donkeys. Okay, so this is very familiar. It's the story where Joseph is going to frame his brothers one last time, and haboker ur, and they all set out, and of course the story with Benjamin and everything is going to happen. He commanded the one in charge of his house, and then boker ur. Remember that. Rabbi Levi said, there was an incident in the south regarding a certain innkeeper who would rise and don his garments at night, and he would say to those who were there, "Arise and go on your way, as I will arrange a caravan to accompany you." They would go out, robbers would meet them and plunder them, and they would come and divide the spoils with him. So what's happening is he sends them out still dark. He puts on his clothing. It's morning. Everyone up. Time to go. And he sends them out, and he arranges for robbers to be meeting them and plundering them. One time Rabbi Meir went and was received there. The innkeeper arose and donned his garments and said to him, "Arise," and you can't apparently argue with the innkeeper who's kicking you out of the inn. Like he's in a more powerful position. "Arise and go on your way, as I will arrange a caravan to accompany you." He said to him, "I have a brother, and I am sitting and waiting for him." He said to him, "Where is he?" He said, "He's in the synagogue." He said to him, "What is his name? I will go and call him." He said to him, "Ki Tov." That entire night, the innkeeper shouted at the entrance of the synagogue, "Ki Tov, Ki Tov," but no one answered him. In the morning, Rabbi Meir rose and bridled his donkey in order to depart. Now that's what's key. It's now light out. This whole trick with the robbers can't happen because breaking dawn and day is a much safer time for traveling. The innkeeper said to him, "Where is that brother of whom," hold on, "you spoke?" He said to him, "He has arrived. God saw the light, that it was good." The or was ki tov, right? So we have two sources. V'yar Elohim et ha'or ki tov. So what we have here is, first of all, we can read it as an amusing tale. You know, the ignorant non-Jew and the wisdom of the sage. Okay. But Avigdor Shanan observes, the meaning of this tale hinges on the dialogue between the innkeeper and Rabbi Meir. And they speak in two different, really, idioms, languages. The innkeeper speaks the language of human beings. Although malicious in his attempt, he addresses his guests in terms they understand. Rabbi Meir speaks the language of Torah. So when he says he has a brother, the innkeeper assumes there's something literal. He's waiting for his brother, and his brother's in the synagogue. And the innkeeper will go call him, "Ki Tov, Ki Tov." But it's not because Rabbi Meir intends to ridicule, but because there's a gap in their language. Rabbi Meir makes his decisions based on Torah. He doesn't really know there's a scheme, but he knows, like, Joseph's brothers got up in the morning, right? The first light of morning. And he knows that God created light and it's ki tov. And so he's waiting until morning because he says he has his brother whose name means ki tov. And now we understand the light to which he's referring to is God saw the light and it was good. So he's not really waiting for a human brother. He's waiting for his companion. And it's a story about brothers. In other words, it's a little complex. Even as I'm saying it, I'm like, this is really a little abstract, but I think it's a very good reading. It's not incidental that the pasuk the Midrash is riffing on is the pasuk about a brother or brothers who go off in the morning, right? The pasuk was Haboker Ur, and the brothers depart. He tells the innkeeper he has a brother named Ki Tov. He knows that story where the brothers went off Boker Ur. And then he says, "Yes, my brother is Ki Tov. The Or is Ki Tov, right? That's my companion." And of course, he is referring to the light of morning, which he looks to as a brother, not as a human brother, but as a companion. So his whole language makes no sense to the innkeeper. I'm not sure it fully makes sense to us. But with the Midrash, it's suggesting not just that he bests the innkeeper, which he does, but it's not even clear that was his intent. He lives his life by an inner immersion of these texts, of these psukim. And so when the innkeeper says, "Who are you waiting for?" and he says his brother, he's referring to the story with the brothers. And then, but Kito, really it's the light of God, the light of morning that is his constant companion. And he's not going to go out without that light accompanying him. And of course, that's what saves him. So it's complex, it's convoluted, it's not a neat analysis. But I do think Avigdor Shanan is onto something when he recognizes this imbalance in conversation, and that the innkeeper really represents human references. But Rabbi Meir speaks in much more abstract terms. And if we go back to his colleagues, they too don't fully understand him. Sometimes his language is too abstract, too obtuse, too ethereal, too not concrete. But it's actually it's a deeper penetration of the mysteries of the language of the Torah, which he then illuminates, right? Light appears both at the beginning and the end of the story, and which carries him into his journey as he journeys. And so I think this story is a lovely connection to all that we've been learning about Rabbi Meir, and that he doesn't have, as far as we know, or the Talmud knows, a physical brother, but his companion is the light, the Yar Elohim et Ha'or Ki Tov, which then we go back to that opening midrash, and it makes so much sense that the Kutonet Or is with an Aleph. Of course, it's with an Aleph. For Rabbi Meir, he is constantly bathed in that light of God that is Ki Tov. And that's what the first humans were clothed in. Okay, I think we have time for one more story, and I think I might have brought this story, but I don't know if I brought it in this class or not. I might have. If it is, it's just again Chazara. I still don't fully understand the end. I'm preparing you. The end is a violent end. It's bizarre, and I don't believe it actually reflects a real incident, but it certainly makes for a good story. And for a little bit like Grimm's fairy tales that have a gruesome ending. So I'm just giving you the heads up. This is in Yoma. Furthermore, it is told, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yassi, three students of Rabbi Akiva that he ordains after the 24,000 reportedly are killed. Many of you have been in my classes where I've talked about whether that's a historical incident or a metaphorical incident, but there's no question that Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yassi have all studied with Rabbi Akiva. And they're walking on the road, they're on a journey. Rabbi Meir would analyze names and discern the nature of a person from their name. A little bit like, what's his name? The guy who does all the names, the Hebrew. I can't believe I'm thinking of Victor Shanan, but it's not. Anyway, it'll come to me. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yassi were not apt to analyze names. It's a little abstract. Again, it fits with our personality of Rabbi Meir. He's always going below the surface. He plumbs things from the depths of places we didn't even know existed. When they came to a certain place, they looked for lodging and were given it. They said to the innkeeper, "What is your name?" He said to them, "My name is Kidur." Rabbi Meir said, "Well, perhaps we can learn from that he is a wicked person, for it says Kidur in the end of Dvarim, in the poem of Ha'azinu, for they are a generation of upheavals, and the language is Kidur." It was Friday afternoon, Erev Shabbos. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yassi gave their purses to him to watch so they wouldn't have to worry about their money on Shabbos. And Rabbi Meir did not. He went and placed it at the grave of the innkeeper's father. The innkeeper's father appeared to the innkeeper in a dream and said to him, "Go take the purse placed at the head of that man." The following day he said, "No, this is what happens." Rabbi Meir puts the purse at the grave, and that night the innkeeper has a dream in which his father appears to him saying, "There's a purse at my grave, come get it." He's very bothered by this dream. He doesn't know whether he should take it seriously or not. We, the readers, know, of course, that he should take it seriously, that this is a real thing. The following day, he said to the sages, "This is what appeared to me in my dream." And they said to him, "Dreams during twilight on Friday night have no substance and should not be trusted." Rabbi Meir, of course, hears this, and he goes and he sits near the grave just to keep an eye. The next day, the rabbi said to the innkeeper, "Give us our purses." He said to them, "I don't know what you're talking about. You never gave me your purses. What purses? This never happened." Rabbi Meir said to them, "Why didn't you analyze his name?" They said to him, "Why didn't the master tell us?" He said to them, "I said one should be suspicious, but have I said a person should be established as wicked? Could I say to you with certainty that he is wicked based on his name alone?" So this is part one of the story. He travels with his companions, going to the inn, to the innkeeper. It's a little dangerous. You never know what you're getting. And there are a lot of unscrupulous innkeepers. Nonetheless, there are a lot of scrupulous innkeepers. It's a business. And you don't want to be an innkeeper with a reputation that you're unscrupulous. But already it's our second story with an unscrupulous innkeeper. Tells us a little bit about how vulnerable travelers were and really continue to be. So Rabbi Meir already ascertains or suspects the character because of his name Kidur, and he manages to hold on to his purse despite the father of the innkeeper coming to warn him or to betray him, betray Rabbi Meir. His colleagues say to him, and this becomes an interesting question, why didn't you warn us? And he says to them, look, I didn't know for sure. Like I protected myself, but you could have done the same thing. Interesting questions about, what if he had been wrong? And then you feel stupid. This is where the story gets a little, it's going to get a little gruesome. What did they do? They dragged the innkeeper and brought him to a store and gave him wine to drink. After he drank the wine, they saw lentils on his mustache. Now, you're going to see where they take it, and it's actually kind of humorous, showing that he had eaten lentils that day. They went and gave this sign. He's now drunk. They've neutralized him. And they go back to his wife and they said, by the way, he told us to tell you that he had lentils at the last meal. So you know that he permitted this. Very clever. And they took their purses and went. He went and killed his wife out of anger that she did this. I told you it had a violent ending. Very sad. This is as we learned in a Braita. Now, the part that's kind of funny is the end. Killing of his wife is not funny. Due to a person's laxity in the first washing, they fed him pork. Now, this is a different story. We're going to see in a moment. There's a Braita. There was an innkeeper who was accustomed, another innkeeper, to feed pork to Gentiles and kosher meat to Jews. He distinguished between Jews and Gentiles by watching to see if they washed their hands before they ate. One time, a Jew came without and ate without washing his hands, without netilat yadayim, and the innkeeper gave him pork to eat. Laxity in the final washing caused the innkeeper, the washing of one's hands and mouth after a meal. So we found the first washing can cause transgression because it doesn't look like you identify as a Jew. The final washing, that you're supposed to wash your mouth and hands after a meal, which by the way is a good idea hygienically, caused the innkeeper to kill his wife. This is similar to that story. Had the wicked innkeeper washed his mouth, the rabbis would not have known he had eaten lentils. So there's something a little humorous about that they're able to see the lentils in his mustache. There's nothing humorous about his killing his wife, but it is an ending that allows for, we'll come back to Rabbi Meir, but it allows for a really interesting rabbinic teaching. Washing your hands before and after the meal. It doesn't really appear in the Torah. It's a rabbinic teaching that you have to do this before you eat your food. How are you going to get people to buy in? You're talking about 2,000 years ago. People were not careful, as we can see from the innkeepers, to wash their hands and mouth. And yet Judaism already brings this in the Second Temple period as central to purity and impurity, to what it means to prepare for a meal. Remember, we're going to be in a post-Second Temple period. We want to replicate the Mikdash a little bit. And so this idea of washing, of sitting at the table, of benching, of divrei Torah at the meal, you're meant to transform this mundane act of eating into something more elevated. And one of the ways is through washing. Of course, there are theories that in the Dark Ages, less Jews died. I don't know if this is scientifically proven because they washed their hands more. This Gemara is saying that washing your hands can save your life. Washing your hands and mouth can save your life. Whether it saves your soul because you'll be fed the kosher meat, or it saves your life because of the story with the innkeeper and his wife, regardless, they use the end of the story as an opportunity to seed the significance of rabbinic law, which tells me a little bit that it's at times an upward battle. How do you get people to adopt practices and rituals that are coming from the rabbinic strata? It's much easier when you can drop psukim in and it's Torah. And so the end of the story is the best place to put this, because if you want people to really buy in, tell them this story. The story about the innkeeper and his wife, the story about the butcher who sells the treif meat. And so, people remember stories. This becomes a more powerful vehicle than teaching Mishnah, right? Than giving a Torah class. So I'm not surprised that the end of the story has this kind of shock value to it that allows them to impose upon it a rabbinic teaching that they really want people to be scrupulous about. Okay, so that's nothing to do with
Right.
Rabbi Meir,
Nechama?
but yes, Donna.
Well, I'm not quite sure I understand. This story seems so completely out of character for the rabbis, whatever, to do this, to do whatever they did. But I don't exactly understand that. Is Rabbi Meir still part of this threesome, or this is just the other two that
Just
took
bother to.
they took the innkeeper and gave him wine, right? And so now he was drunk. And then they saw he had lentils. And then they made up this thing, went back to his wife and said, "Oh, listen, he said that if he ate lentils for the last meal, and we know that he did, you have to give us back our purses." They made this up, right?
So they make this up. Look, in all fairness, until that point of the story, everything's okay. He's been deceitful with them, and they're being deceitful in order to get their money back. That's all okay. I truly believe, first of all, I'm always going to question whether a story happened as it's portrayed or whether the violence at the end is not, a way of creating an ending that you're going to remember, and then you're going to put
It
this
just
teaching
doesn't
about the
sound
hand
like
washing on top of it.
he was
But it is,
deceitful. He was deceitful to them. Okay, he's an innkeeper. We know they're scrupulous innkeepers and unscrupulous innkeepers, but they're Torah scholars. I mean, it doesn't sound like the way they should act. That they should get their
well, the
money
question is,
back by
so
deceit.
yeah, he stole their money. They want to get their money
Okay,
back. No one has enough money to be able to like let go a purse full of coins, and
but
there's
they
no way they'll be able to get it from him. You can like or not like. I would say I'm less bothered by that because he's a cheat and a thief. I don't have any issues with they don't do anything even destructive. They basically go and they say to her, yeah, he said, give us our purses. He ate lentils, but it's
okay.
clever. They don't harm
So,
him. They don't tie him up. They don't
right.
like break anything. They like it's all very low key. Like the way they do it is clever without being harmful. They couldn't have anticipated that he was going to go do what he did. It just tells us what a Russia he is, right? It is a terrible person. But yeah, you know,
Okay. No, so she said,
yeah, yeah, you
so
can you can remain.
she told him, oh, I gave them back their money because they said,
Yes, because
and
they
then
they
he
told
killed,
me you said it was okay, and then he says don't be ridiculous, and he kill it does,
and he kills her.
that gets very messy. So
Yeah,
I just want to wrap up. I want to just conclude because that part wasn't about Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir never gave over his purse. Rabbi Meir
right.
already anticipated the reshoot, the wickedness of this innkeeper, and safeguarded, protected himself. And this last story really fits very well with this ability to see beyond what's on the surface, to go deeper, to see in a name something that like Kidor, like where are you getting Kidor from? Like, why would you break that name into two? And he's already able to see and analyze. It's almost like you can imagine a little bit. I like the show The Good Doctor, and so you have this very high functioning autistic doctor, and every so often it like opens up what's going on in his mind, and there are all these pieces
Right.
moving around until they finally settle in a way that he understands, but his fellow doctors have a hard time following
Oh,
his thinking method. So I am not suggesting, I'm not using an anachronistic term of autism, God forbid. But I will say what we're hearing here is someone who thinks in terms and in concepts that even for the rabbis of the academy at times are too abstract, but they serve him well. They served him well with the first innkeeper, where he was waiting for his companion Kitov in the morning, which is actually quite sweet. Maybe he never had a brother, and this is his imaginary brother. The light of the morning becomes his companion. And we saw with the innkeeper and the key door, and just circling back, the idea that Rabbi Yehuda sees his back, and that's enough for clarity. I would even argue maybe if Rabbi Yehuda had seen his front, it would have been too much clarity, and it would have been too bright a light. So everything about Rabbi Meir suggests a certain light, a divine light, a connection, to Torah, b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, and yet there's also a distance, right? He's both walking with his colleagues, and yet he sees things differently, and he's not able to really share it. And I would even argue he might be even a little wary of sharing with them this whole Kiddur thing. What if it turns out he's wrong and they end up mocking him, or they're like, oh, come on, like where did you get that from? So even, not even someone like Rabbi Meir might have to be a little cautious about sharing some of his abstract understanding of what's going on beyond the surface, because not everyone speaks the same language he does. We're going to stop here. You can stop the recording. I'm going to make a request, but not for next week. I would like to move the time to 5:10 if that's not too burdensome, because I have a slight scheduling conflict with a class that's really supposed to end at 5:10. And so I'm going to ask the office if they can put out a request and see if people are okay with the 10 minutes. Thank you very much. It was lovely teaching you. Anyone want to, I can't see everyone. I'd like to go to gallery view. Let's see if I can do that. So I can see everyone and say goodbye. Thank you for joining. And we're going to continue with Rebbe Meir next week. We still have a number of really beautiful sources to learn. But for me also, this is an opportunity to learn a lot of new Talmudic stories. And I, as you know, love stories and love Midrash and like the complexity of those spaces in which we get to know characters through all sorts of different encounters they have. So thank you. And may it be a quiet week and a Chodesh Tov.
Chodesh Tov, Shavua Tov.